Chris Thompson here from Property Portal Marketing, and I'm back with Simona for episode 2 of our marketing and tech podcast. Simona, how are we week 2?
Well, good. This time sunny London. Yay!
That's good. Excellent. I do like it when the sun shines. Everyone feels a little bit better, which is nice. I was at a friend's wedding over the weekend back in the UK, and it was like 22 degrees, really nice cold beer, alcohol, wine. Oh, fantastic. Good. So, what are we talking about in episode 2? XML feeds. So, yeah, good. So, funnily enough, I think one of the most asked questions that I get from clients and from non-clients is, what is an XML feed? What does it do? How does it work? And then essentially what happens is whenever there's a problem with a feed, it's Chris, there's a problem with our feed. Fix it. So I think today's episode would be really good just to talk about feeds, what they are, how they work, what kind of issues there are, what the cost of an XML feed is, just to give agents a little bit more insight as to the tech side of it, but in really simple terms, something they can understand, hopefully, so that when there are issues, they know a little bit more about what's going on and why it might take the sort of time that it takes to fix. So I think you've got some questions for me, haven't you?
Well, first one, it's exactly what is an XML feed?
What is an XML feed? Hooray! Let's start at the beginning. So in really simple terms, an XML feed is a bridge. It's a bridge that connects two websites together. So if you're looking at it from a real estate term, it will connect your real estate website to a property portal like A Place in the Sun or Rightmove. And essentially, it's a bit of code that will automatically connect the two sites together. And usually it will refresh data overnight, or maybe a little bit quicker than that, depending on the format of the feed.
Okay, so basically, it allows real estate websites to automate the distribution of their listings
Across multiple platforms. Yes, correct. And that can be done individually, or it can be done through a CRM provider or through a specific XML feed provider. If you look at it like a bridge, it's much, much easier.
So for those who are just starting with XML feeds, where do we press the button? So let's say this one.
I love how you asked that, because there's so many points to that question. I really wish that sometimes you could just press a button and it would go ta-da. But we know that it doesn't work that way. So let's break those questions down, because I think they need to be broken down. So let's start with maybe how an XML feed works.
Yep.
Right.
How does an XML feed work?
So there are 3 main ways that an XML feed provider or a CRM provider can build a feed. Okay. The first way is they connect remotely to your website database through their server. Second way is through a source feed, which is a feed that can be provided to that company, and then that company that you've asked to build a feed for you then uses that source feed to build a feed. Or the third way is to do a scrape of your website. It's like a data scrape, and then you put it into the format that the portal you're sending it to requires. The best way and the most reliable, the most effective method, certainly from our perspective that we find, is to do a remote connection to the database, because you're getting live data and because the connection is to a reliable source. So you're not having to rely on any third party. You can connect straight in, and what you see is what you get.
So if I'm a real estate agent and I want to have the XML feed installed, what do I have to do? So what do I have to actually do?
So there's 2 parts to that. So one of those parts depends on the actual method that you have for your real estate website, because there's 2 paths that you can take. So you can take a website that is built individually for you, in which case the XML feed method would be that you contract either your own website designer to build a feed for you, or you contract a specific XML building company like ourselves, or there's a couple of other ones out there that will then go and build a feed specifically for you. The other option that you've got is, if you don't want to build your own individual website, you can go down a template style company who will basically provide you with some templates that you can use. And within that, you'll get like a website CRM and then a couple of other things included. And one of those things that they include might be the XML feed export, in which case it's through their own software and they will just send it directly out. There are pros and cons to using both methods. We'll probably talk about those in another session. But unfortunately, with these things, it's never just as simple as going boop. There are various elements to it. But in theory, as I say, there's 3 ways to building the feed. One is a direct connection, one is source feed, and the other one is a data scrape.
As the third question that was prepared was, are there many formats of an XML feed?
So, yes, there are, funnily enough. There are various formats.
So there is a list.
There is a list. Yes, there is. And there are a number of different formats. But the good thing is that many of the portals out there will, in one way or another, all use the same format. Now, the format that they like to use is what's known as a Kiero v3 format. The format itself is basically how you build the feed. So what are the various elements that you need? What is the data? What are the data fields specifically within that format that will mean the feed can work? Now, those fields are normally things like property reference number, bathrooms, location as in province, town, city, or province, town, city, region, country, build size, plot size, and then image tags. There are a couple of portals out there, however, that won't accept that Kiero v3 format. Idealist and Rightmove being 2 that immediately spring to mind. They will take a different format altogether. So you can't, it's not just a case of where you get one feed and that one feed will work for every single portal. Because of the different formats.
So it's important for real estate agents to clarify this from the beginning.
Correct.
Exactly what type of feed they are getting,
yes,
and how it's going to affect their future basic
correct
functionality.
Yes. The general rule of thumb is build a feed in the Kiero v3 format, and probably 75 to 80% of portals will accept it. There's only a few that won't. They will normally tell you that. Also, what you would expect is if you are going to use CRM provider for your website, if you go down the website templated route, or if you use a specific XML feed provider, they will already have good relationships with the portals anyway. So when you go to them and say, right, I need a feed for Rightmove, generally that company that you've contracted will know what format
has already one prepared
anyway. Correct. They should have feeds built anyway within that.
Great. Now to the thorny part. What are some of the issues that can happen?
How long have you got?
Using an XML.
How long have you got? Genuinely, it's only meant to last about half an hour. These episodes could talk for hours on this. Right. So again, we have to break this down into various, not necessarily various sort of questions, but various sort of scenarios, because with any kind of tech product, there's always going to be little bits of things that potentially could go wrong. So where do we begin with this? I guess, yes, there are issues that are going to happen. And I think one of the biggest issues that we get is where agents have 2.5 bedrooms or 2.5 bathrooms, right? Or they put, as the build size, they'll put 40.5. The problem that we have is a lot of the portals will not accept decimal points on their systems. They can't process.
Yeah, because there are properties that have like 2 main bathrooms and an external toilet or a guest toilet or a loo, and they're just going to point that 3.5.
They're going to put it as a half bathroom or even a half. Unfortunately, the portals can't accept that. So when that happens, what usually will take place next is the agent will come and they'll say, well, I've uploaded this property and it's not, I can't see it on the portal. And we'll then have to go and investigate that and say, all right, it's because you've got 2.5 bedrooms, or you've got 2.5 bathrooms, or you've got build size of 50.4 or 80.5. Unfortunately, the portals don't accept that. At some point in the near future, they might start to, but right now they don't. So you just need to make sure that in those, when you're uploading properties onto your site as a real estate agent, you need to make sure that what you're uploading in those sorts of fields are whole numbers rather than decimal point.
That is tricky because there are a lot of properties that have those 2 points.
There are, but I think what you need to do is just make it clear within the description that there is potentially a half bathroom. But within that node itself, when I say node, I mean a field. So within that bedroom or bathroom field, just need to make sure that there's whole numbers within that. One of the second biggest issues that we get is where you have things like and or commas or apostrophes or quotes, right?
Chris, question.
Go on.
Because for now, I've seen on some of the real estate websites text with emojis even in titles of the
Yes.
properties. What
Yes.
happened with that?
So let's cover off the emojis after we've covered this one, this last one. So sometimes you might have you might not use the word and, you might use the symbol and, or you might put things in inverted commas, or you might put full stops and things like that. When we send an XML feed through the system, every symbol has to be coded. So there is a code that we have to put in for each symbol. And when we send it, will have its own code. It will never just, it will appear as an and on the front end of the portal and on that real estate agent's website. But when we send the feed, it will need to be coded correctly. Now, that is not the agent's responsibility. That is the responsibility of the person who's building the feed. But sometimes if there is an issue, it's because there is a symbol that maybe hasn't been used before that the XML feed builder is not aware of. Most XML feed builders and most CRM companies are aware of the general kind of things. So I'm talking about the and symbols, the inverted commas, things like that. But if somebody starts to use something that hasn't been recognized before, like an emoji, that could cause a problem because the XML field builder won't be aware of it. In my mind, there's no reason as to why there's no reason as to why you should be using an emoji. I don't think it adds anything.
I've seen title
you
of
know,
properties with sun emojis and heart emojis and beach emojis and I don't know, palm tree emojis. So you pick it, like,
Well, I guess
that
it
are
just
up there.
it adds a different element to the title, doesn't it? Or it adds a different kind of, it makes you stand out a little bit. But just be wary when you do that because it can and probably will cause issues with the feed. If you are going to do it, just make your feed builder aware, and then they will either tell you whether they can program it or they can't program it. Sometimes with an emoji, it's not actually a code; it's an individual image. Therefore, you have to put an image within the description, and that doesn't really work from a feed processing point of view either. So, if you're unsure, hold off doing it. Speak to your feed provider first or your IT provider and say, "I want to do this. Is it possible?" And they will then let you know. In terms of other feed issues, it's mainly from a sort of a build perspective. I don't want to sound too technical here, but a big thing that you might get is where agents are using a language plugin on their website. Language is present on the front end of the site. When a language is used on the front end of the site, it's very difficult to get that data included in the feed, especially if the method that person is using is a remote connection to the database. And the reason that there is because if the information is not directly on the database, it won't be picked up by the system. Therefore, it can't be included. So here's a prime example. An agent might come to us and say, Chris, we're using language descriptions on our website. We'd like these language descriptions included in the feed because Key Aero, for example, or a place in the sun, will take these language descriptions and have them on their website. And my answer will be, are you using a plugin for that language? Right? Yes, we are. Okay. If you're using a plugin, unfortunately, I can't include that within the feed. Now, there are some providers that might be able to do that, but it is a complicated process. It's not an easy process to do. The best way to do it is, if you do want languages, is to essentially manually add those languages to the database, and then they will sit in the back end, and then you can then include them in the feed. Problem.
Yeah, all of the real estate agents went
exactly. The problem with doing that, of course, is that it's a lot of work, especially if you've got 1,500 listings. What I would suggest you do as a way of getting around it is do it for your direct listings, but don't do it for collaborative listings. So, for example, if you're an agent and let's say you've got 100 properties on your site and 20 of those are your own exclusive listings, do it for your exclusive listings, manually add the languages into the back end of the website. It won't affect the front end. Manually add those descriptions, onto those listings, and then you can feed those through on the XML. Which leads me, the next thing I want to talk about, and it leads me quite nicely into that, is update times. I don't think we had did we have a question on update times? We didn't, did we?
Updates times. No, I
No.
do have a question
Okay.
that I don't want to skip, and that is important for them. How long does it take to build up an update?
Perfect. Good. So we have a little bit of a question on it, because that was one of the things I was going to include in the issues, because sometimes we'll get agents thinking that the reason why a property that they've ticked to show on the portal isn't there is because there's an issue in the feed, whereas actually it's not an issue with the feed, it's an issue with an update. Whilst I remember, I'm going to go back to something that just popped into my head, which is back to how does an XML feed work? Because there are scenarios where we get agents who say, well, actually, I want to be specific about the properties that I'm advertising on a portal. The reason why they might say that is because when you advertise on portals, and we're going to do an episode on specifically advertising on portals in the near future, but when you advertise on portals, they will normally charge you based on the amount of properties that you want to upload. But you might have more properties than that limit allows, right? So you have to be specific about the properties that you want. Now, you can say to your feed provider, or say to whoever's building that feed, you can say, well, for example, I only want the most recent properties going live, in which case the feed provider just sends through the most recent 100 listings, for example. But you might say, well, actually, I want to be able to be specific about which properties I want to send through to the portals. If you are going down the route of a manual website builder,
and your face is saying, don't do that.
You contracted somebody to build a website for you without going down the template route, then it's relatively easy, because what that person can do is they can build in a tick box, for example, on the back end of your website. When you then upload a property, you can then tick that box that says, I want this property going to that portal. And then you can do that throughout. So there is an easy process to it. If you want to be specific, you just have to make a quick change to your website, or even to the database of your website, so that when the XML feed provider builds that feed, they know specifically that these properties that are ticked go through to this portal, these ones that are ticked go through to this portal. If you don't want to use a tick box, I told you there was a lot of information. If you don't want to use a tick box, or you can't use a tick box for any reason, then you can put something in the ref number, for example. So you might say to me, oh, everything that's got an exclamation mark on the end of the ref number, I want it sent through to Rightmove. Everything with a star on the end of the ref number, I want it sent through to A Place in the Sun. Everything that's got an exclamation mark and a star, I want it sent through to Rightmove and A Place in the Sun, right? So there are different ways that you go around that specifically. You just need to be wary of them, and it really depends on what you want. Sometimes just to be really easy and just so that the portals get regularly updated, sometimes it's easier just to go, right, we'll send in the most recent 100 and then you're done. But other people might want to be specific, and that will become a little bit more prevalent when we actually do an episode on portal advertising directly. You might want to be specific for various reasons. So how long does it take? We got there in the end. How long does it take to build or update a feed? So most feed providers out there will generally be able to build you a feed within a couple of days. 24 to 48 hours is usually the time. If you're with the CRM provider, it might be a little bit quicker, because you just need to tick a few boxes. If you're with a feed builder like ourselves, for example, or if you're with a data scraping company, might be a little bit longer, but it shouldn't take any longer than a couple of days. It will depend on website's been built. It will depend on what your database looks like. It will depend on you want the most recent 100 properties, or whether you want to tick properties. So there are a couple of points, but it shouldn't take any longer than the days at most. In terms of updating a feed, so generally any sort of CRM provider or any feed provider, generally they will always make sure that those feeds themselves update overnight. With portals, however, it's slightly different. So it depends on the format. Okay. If you're using a Kiero V3 format, all right, generally they will only update their feeds once a day, and they will usually do those overnight. So with APITS, it's usually 12 to 24 hours. Okay, but it can take up to 48 hours. A lot of the other portals, it's exactly the same. But generally, you should say 12 to 24 hours and it will be updated. Okay. If a property, you've gone in and you've ticked a property to appear on the portals, or it's one of your most recent ones and it doesn't appear, don't panic straight away. It may just be that the feed our end, as in your website end, has updated, but the portal hasn't yet updated. In which case, it's best to give it another 12 hours and see. If it still doesn't update, then you can get in contact with your provider and say, "Oh, there's an issue, fix it." But always make sure you've given that little bit of time. I mean, we've had agents ring us and say, "Oh, I've ticked a property and it's not live." Right, well, when did you tick that property? "Oh, I ticked it this morning." Right, okay, well, it's not going to have updated yet because it's not going to have updated from our side. Rightmove, even Zoopla, I think, are a little bit different. They accept a different feed format. For example, we set our Rightmove feeds to update every 4 hours. With other companies, it might be a little bit quicker, it might be a little bit slower, but that is just one of those things. It depends on who you go with.
Okay. I have a question here. What are the benefits of using an XML feed over other data transfer methods?
Okay, question. An XML feed, because it's automatic, it will save you a heck of a lot of time when it comes to your marketing. You can spend hours upon end uploading and editing properties and removing properties from the portals. An XML feed will do all of that for you automatically, generally within 12 to 24 hours. Especially difficult if you're a small to medium-sized company. Let's say you've only got 2 or 3 people within the business. And you consistently have to spend. Let's say you've got you want to advertise on a new portal. If you've got 100 properties, you've got to upload those 100 properties, and then if you are advertising on 3 or 4 portals, it's a full-time job because every new upload 4 times, every edit you have to edit 4 times, the picture change it 4 times. Every time you have to manage that process, and it does become it becomes quite mundane, and it becomes a little bit times. So the benefit of using an XML feed is that it does it all automatically for you. The only changes you have to make are on your own website. Once you've made those changes on your own website, it gets updated on the portal website. You're generally within 12 to 24 hours. So it is a heck of a lot quicker. One thing to add to that is sometimes once a sort of feed has gone through, if there's an issue, what agents will do is they will then manually change that property on the portal itself or on the other website, wherever they're feeding to. Please don't do that. The reason being is if you do that, one of 2 things will happen. That property will then become a manual property, and it will never then be updated by the portal directly. Okay. The other thing that will happen is when that feed refreshes overnight, it will overwrite the changes that you've made anyway. So if you spot that there's an issue or something wrong with a particular property, always get back in contact with your feed provider and get them to fix it directly, or fix the property on your website, and then it will automatically update.
Okay, and one of the last questions.
Yes.
What is the cost of the XML feed?
Yes.
That hurts.
The reason why I sort of this is because since the time that we've been building XML feeds, which is since 2016, seen a lot of variation in terms of what people are charging. Saying this to annoy anybody, but it seems to me that independent companies, okay, or like IT consultants, right? If you have your own website and you have an IT person managing that website for you, it seems like they will charge a heck of a lot of money. I've seen and I've heard companies charging up to 250, 300 euros for an XML feed. That for me is not justifiable, right? It's outrageous for anyone to charge 300 euros, right, per feed for like a one-off feed, right, to manage it. It just doesn't make sense from that point of view.
And it's kind of scaring the businesses, medium and any family businesses away.
Yeah, you've got 3 portals, right, that you want to advertise on, right? That's 900 euros straight away, gone out your marketing budget. a lot to fathom. That's quite hard to swallow.
It is a lot for one to, yeah.
Quite an amount. So what a lot of the more, I don't want to use the word reputable because there are a lot of IT companies out there that are reputable, but what you'll find is that with sort of a direct XML feed building company, one that scrapes your database, or somebody like us that will remotely connect, or that, they will do is they will charge you a monthly fee, which will be like a management fee, and they will charge that based on portals you're going to or how many portals you're feeding to. So, for example, with us at Property Portal Marketing, we will charge you a fee, and that will be a fixed fee on a number of feeds. That is basically a month for up to 3 feeds. It will be a setup fee of €100 on that. And that is payable either sort of or 12 months in advance. So we're up to 3 feeds with a setup fee. Much more manageable that way, paying kind of €900 upfront. And there's other companies that are relatively similar and relatively just as competitive as we are in terms of things. So I don't know, there's some LTU or one of them, DAC were another one. And also the providers themselves charge you some of this. In fact, actually, some of the CRM providers will automatically build that cost into their monthly sort of management fee. So they'll charge you like a website and a CRM and a feed and a couple of other bits and pieces, and it will be tied into one price. It entirely depends on what method you've used, looked at building your website. But I know I sound really vague, but it can vary. All I'm saying is if it does sound like a lot of money, just do your research before you decide.
Okay. Give me 4 do's and 4 don'ts for XML feed real estate.
In what context?
Well, in the context of PPM, it's advising you to do this for XML feeds on your website. Number 1, do not put 2.1. No, this is the don't.
Number 1 is always make sure that you filled in every field correctly. In bedrooms, area size, applies build size. Make sure that you've got a province, a town filled in, and a country filled in. Country is not so important because we can normally figure that out. But yeah, you always need to make sure that you've got a province and an area. You are in an area where you are dealing with pretty small towns. So there's been a number of examples whereby we've had feed for an agent. It's gone through the portal. It's then not been uploaded in the correct area. Okay. Might be because the portal doesn't currently map that location. You can check that if you go to a portal, for example, you can check if they've got that location or not. So always do your research. Make sure that you're not paying outrageously for an XML feed because there might be other options out there for you. And it's not always the XML feed builder's fault. It's not always their fault. We've made mistakes, and I'm pretty sure that other companies make mistakes as well, but it's not always our fault. Just so many elements going into it. Take a step back, take a breather before you automatically blame the feed company. For a lot of elements to it. So yeah, always guilty.
All right. I just thought of another question, and this one can be very important for them. Very, very quickly. How can you ensure the security basically of the data that you are sharing and providing? So how can they basically make sure their data is secure with an XML feed?
So you have to be quite careful about where you're sending an XML feed to. And I think this leads probably into, I think this will probably lead into another episode where we talk about like sending feeds out and things like that. With feeds, you can't do a lot with them. Sending them specifically to a portal who are going to upload that data to their website, right? These is effectively, it's like a data file. So if you send me a feed, right, the only thing I can do with it is upload it onto my website. I can't really do a lot with it apart from that. You're sending data in the feed, like for example, if you're sending like full address in the feed, don't forget a lot of portals don't require you to send the full address. And actually, a lot of agents themselves don't want to send a full address either, because they're worried that people who are looking to buy will go behind their backs and knock on doors, and agents will go behind their backs and knock on doors individually and things like that. There isn't really any sensitive data that you send in an XML feed, because a lot of what is being sent I can find on your website anyway. So you just need to be careful with an XML feed. You get the feedback, you send it to the portals, and don't send it anywhere, like to any third party, without your consent. Only issue that you might have, for example, when you contract the XML feed provider, if they do go down a route of getting access to your database, you need to trust that provider, read that data incorrectly and not do anything else with it. So, for example, with us, when we get remote direct access, we only have read-only access. We're not able to do anything else with it. I guess that's just a trust thing. You have to be able to trust the people that you partner with. Electronic Boredom works with us. They don't work with us. They partner with us. That's how I always want PPM to work, is any agent that we work with, they partner with us and we partner with them. The only thing, you have to be able to trust the people that you partner with. And if you do contract somebody who wants to go down that route of being able to connect to your database, you've got to trust that they're not going to screw anything up, I guess. Because if that happens, it's quite difficult to get that information back. If you decide to go down a CRM route, so one of these companies that does the CRM and a website and all encompassing, then generally you're not going to have any security issues, because they will do everything within their own private setup. So it depends on which method you go down, but you should be all right with that. Probably worth mentioning, talking about XML feeds, it's probably worth mentioning, you can also have XML feeds coming into your website as well, right? Agents, a lot of estate agents, certainly in Spain, Portugal to a point, them even collaborating, Greece, they will collaborate with each other. The way that they collaborate with each other is they will share XML feeds. So you can have an XML feed going into your website as an agent, as well as going out of your website. The import process is different, obviously, because you have to have somebody to import that feed for you. Might be worth another episode, maybe, talking about XML feeds. But yeah, it's worth mentioning that as well. There's a lot of agents that we get who say to us, I've got a feed that I want to import into my website. Can do that. I'm pretty sure that that's the case with a lot of other agents out there as well, whether they're using us or not. We'll probably want at some point to collaborate with other people.
What kind of support and maintenance is required when you're dealing with an XML feed?
There always has to be a direct connection between your XML feed supplier and portal, between your portal website, because it's like a bridge. If that direct connection isn't there, the feed will no longer work.
So if internet goes down?
If the internet goes down, that's different, because the connection is remote, right? So it's already there, it's set up. It's if, for example, a real estate agent chooses to move onto a different server, okay, causes a problem, right? Because the way that the XML feed has been set up is to use the existing server that they've told us about. If they then move to another server, obviously there is no data left on the existing server. So when that XML feed company tries to connect, nothing happens. The feed stops working. Okay. If, as an estate agent, you have an XML feed in place and then you decide to move server, or you decide to change something on your website, like the layout of properties on your website or something like that, always be sure to notify your feed provider so that they can then add the programming feed so that it works. But it's because it's a bridge. If you disconnect that bridge, it falls away, it will no longer work. So the maintenance of it is to keep that connection alive. And then obviously, if there's any issues, those issues will then be fixed as part of that maintenance. Well.
Okay. Exhausting my questions. So I've exhausted all the questions I had.
Okay.
And honestly, think of another question. It's just, I think, a matter of getting to real estate agencies and telling them, okay, you need to use these XML feeds with a trusted provider, and you have to be very, very careful to what you put in there. So basically, stick to accuracy. try to go down with emojis and weird signs and
please avoid emojis within feeds.
make our lives easier. Don't do that, please. And if anything happens, just take a deep breath and call your provider. It's gonna work there.
Provider.
Repeat for them 3 main advantages, on the start for using this as soon as possible. Or
there's really only one main advantage. No, I love 3s as well, like bang bang. But the
what
real
do you
main
mean? It saves time.
It saves massive amounts of time,
It makes your life easy.
And it probably saves some cost as well, I would have thought. It's money, I think. Time is money. I love that phrase. I think the one big thing here is this time-saving aspect to it. Be done automatically rather than manually.
Okay. This note, should we spoil with the topic for the 3rd episode?
Yeah, we're going to do next week, actually. With that, see what we can do. Should we delve into the world of Facebook?
Oh, how much time do you have for next week? Okay. If you want to choose Facebook for next week, we can discuss some of the meta business aspects for meta business of business pages, the things that work very well, some of the things that you're going to, as a real estate agent, when you're using that platform, you're going to have some issues with it. I personally have a love-hate relationship. Mostly I hate it, but it's functional and it works well. It's just it's not very user-friendly, and it can have some quirks that if you don't know where to look for them, it can make your life a bit difficult. Cover that.
Let's talk a little bit about content, business manager. Let's try and do Facebook, not anything else for the moment, because I think as we spoke about,
let's try to do Facebook topic number 1, content.
Content is king.
Yeah, but strategy is the queen.
Yeah, do. Let's delve into the world of Facebook next week, and we'll run with that. The week after, we can do Instagram. The week after that, we can talk about portals, maybe the week after that. But let's do Facebook next week and talk about the beast that is Meta. So
there will be 2 episodes on Facebook, just because there are a few aspects that I want to cover, and I want to point out a few of the things that you can on Facebook. And 30 minutes is really compact time to actually discuss everything. So
let's do content next week. So talking about postings and content, and the week after we can maybe talk about or even we can come back to it. We can keep our agents on tenterhooks.
Okay, so we have it. Next week episode, it will be on Facebook and content, how to use it, how not to use it, and what you actually put out there.
Good.
Okay.
If any of you have any questions on email feeds, I've answered all of them, but there's always questions. So if you have got any questions, there's anything that you'd like to know, website or comment on the video, or and we will be happy to help. Thank you very much, Simona. That was fun. Everybody got lots of information, and have a good rest of the week, and we'll see you again in episode 3.